Meleys the Red Queen, ferocious she-dragon of the queen who never was, explored. As a creature of war, a dragon has many traits that make it the most desirable mount in the known world. For one thing, they can fly, which is rare as it is, but then you throw in dragon flames into the mix and you've basically got a living, breathing flamethrower that you can ride into battle and probably scare your enemies off with. But that doesn't mean a dragon doesn't need other traits to survive in a world filled with men who either want to tame them or kill them and rise to glory and fame. The growth of a dragon is contingent upon the conditions in which it is reared, after all, and those factors lend themselves to unique manifestations of strength, size, and speed. Balerion the Black Dread was the largest known dragon at the time of his death, and his flames could literally melt stone. Vermithor was one of the physically strongest dragons known to Westeros, and House Targaryen, but when it comes to speed, there was no one who could compare to the Red Queen. Meleys had 2 dragon riders in her lifetime, and lived for well over half a century, but never lost her title of being the swiftest dragon that House Targaryen ever owned. Let's take a look into the life of this ferocious she-dragon, who was ridden by not one, but 2 queens, who never were. And spoiler alert, because there will be a lot of those in this video. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Etymology, birthplace, and early years. As you guys know by now, a Targaryen dragon is named after a Valyrian god or some trait/characteristic that defines their personality/appearance. Meleys was named in accordance with the former tradition, but her nickname came from the latter. We do not know which Valyrian god or goddess she was named after, but we do know why she was called the Red Queen. Caraxes, who was born around the same time as her, was called the Bloodworm, not just for his distinct look and ferocity, but also his coloring. He was a savage dragon with blood-red scales and a mean temperament which could only be satisfied with a sanguine treat. By contrast, Meleys was called the Regal and Swift Red Queen. She had scarlet scales and pink wing membranes, with her horns, crest, and claws shining bright as burnished copper. Though her eye color is not mentioned, it stands to reason that her eyes were copper in coloring as well, as most Targaryen dragons tended to manifest the same eye colors as the color of their markings and claws. Meleys' fiery breath must also have been a burning scarlet shot through with jets and copper, making our flamethrower analogy from earlier quite literal in Meleys' case. At this point, we must also point out that Meleys is referred to as a she-dragon in all records about her existence, with one of her writers even confirming her as such through one of the rare pieces of dialogue to be found in Fire and Blood. While we are aware of the fact that a dragon's sex is apparently as changeable as flame, something Septon Barth and Maester Aemon both believe in, we think that the case of the dragon gender studies is more based on sequential hermaphroditism, which dictates that an organism can change its sex based on certain physiological and environmental conditions, which need to be fulfilled first. Meleys is consistently referred to as a she-dragon in all the histories, most likely because she was observed to have lain clutches of dragon eggs. In fact, it's possible that she was the mother of Seasmoke, the dragon that belonged to her most famous rider, Rhaenys Targaryen. As for her birthplace, it is not a stretch to assume that Meleys was one of the first dragons to be born in the dragon pit of King's Landing. After completion of the Red Keep under his watchful eye, King Maegor ordered the construction of the Dragon Pit, a great stone stable to house the royal dragons in 45 AC. The project would not be finished in his lifetime, as Maegor would die on the Iron Throne 3 years into his commencement. It would be picked up by Lord Rhaegar Baratheon, who served as Jaehaerys' hand of the king before his majority and one of his regents, but dropped by 50 AC due to a severe lack of funds. After Jaehaerys comes into his throne, he appoints the Pentoshi Rhaego Draz as his Master of Coin, who helps his king finish the construction of the Dragon Pit by 55 AC. Initially, the stone stable is left unused because Jaehaerys and Alysanne preferred to keep their dragons at the Red Keep, close to themselves. But that changed in 56 AC, when Balerion returned to King's Landing with the lost Princess Arya on his back, and seeing the Black Dread with his massive wounds on his person at this age moved Jaehaerys into taking action. He confined the oldest Targaryen dragon to the Dragon Pit, making Balerion the first dragon to reside in Maegor's Great Stone Stable, which is poetic in and of itself, as he was also Maegor's mount, established the Order of the Dragon Keepers, and brought 3 young dragons to give the Black Dread company in his old age. We can assume that at least some of these dragons were female, because after 56 AC is when we start hearing about 2 kinds of Targaryen dragons. One's born on Dragonstone, and one's born on King's Landing. Meleys categorically falls into the latter classification, because we have never heard a single word about her being brought there or being born somewhere else. We are also told that for the few years of her life, she is never ridden, which means that when she was claimed for the first time, she could not have been younger than at least a decade, as that statement indicates she was of riding size by then. So Meleys spent her early years growing up as one of the first properly domesticated generation of dragons, being protected and looked after by dragon keepers, and most likely learning how to fend for herself within that great stone stable where she was birthed. Dragons are willful beasts by nature, and if we are right about where she was born and who she grew up with, then Meleys would have had no content for herself against Caraxes, and that itself is enough to make any dragon a hardened war veteran. She would not be claimed by a rider until the year 75 AC, when she was claimed by another prospective Red Queen. Meleys' first rider and her time as a mount of a prospective queen consort. Meleys was born during the reign of King Jaehaerys I, and so was her first rider. Princess Alyssa Targaryen, named after her famed grandmother, was the 5th born child of the Conciliator and his good queen, and the 3rd to survive infancy. Alyssa was a fiery young maid, with dirty blonde hair and mismatched eyes, and a penchant to spend as much time in silks as she did in mail. In truth, the latter was probably more favored by the princess, as it is said she preferred doing all the things that her brother Balon did, and even shunned the company of young girls who could have grown up to become her ladies-in-waiting. In 75 AC, Alyssa married her brother Balon, with the pair having become inseparable by that time, and after a betting ceremony that sparked ribald jokes all over the royal court, Alyssa decided it was time for her to claim the dragon of her own. Her oldest brother Aemon had claimed the fearsome Caraxes for his steed, and her husband was the rider of the mighty Vhagar. 3 heads has the dragon, and so counting herself as the 3rd, Alyssa decided that it was time for her to claim one for herself. She visited the dragon pit after getting married and consummating said marriage, and it appears as though she wanted to show up her brothers by claiming the largest and oldest known dragon in the world at the time, Balerion the Black Dread. But after his mystery fight with Arya Targaryen and sustaining injuries that never truly allowed him to recover to 100%, the mighty mount of Aegon the Conqueror had become lazy and would not be of any help to her if, gods forbid, she got into a tough spot and needed to fight her way out. They had to convince her to choose a younger dragon instead, assuring her that she would much prefer one that is faster and healthier than the ancient Balerion, and so Alyssa decided to claim Meleys for her steed. It is said that after she established her bond with Meleys and flied her to prove its steadfastness, Alyssa told her newest companion that they were red maidens, the 2 of us, but now we've both been mounted. Though the princess was never directly involved in any battles that we know of, we do know that she was extremely fond of flying. It's said that when Princess Alyssa was not found spending time with her husband in their bedchambers, she would be seen flying with Aemon and Balon, all 3 of them mounted atop their dragons, and cutting a figure that reminded the people of the 7 kingdoms of the Conqueror's 3. Alyssa's dragon bond with Meleys seems to have been a deeply personal one as well, because she decided to do something every mother would only call madness upon the birth of her first child. By the time Princess Alyssa had claimed Meleys, she was already the swiftest dragon in possession of the Targaryens, easily outpacing Vhagar and Caraxes whenever the 3 siblings went out flying. While a speedy dragon is good for fights and flight scenarios, it isn't exactly ideal for carrying a newborn babe around. But that is just what the princess did. When her son Viserys was but 9 days old, Alyssa strapped him to her chest with his swaddling clothes and took him into the sky on Meleys' back, ignoring all advice from septas and maesters alike. She would do the same 4 years later for her son Daemon as well, though him she would take a fortnight after his birth. It's ironic that where Alyssa wasn't allowed to claim Balerion, her son Viserys would only claim the Black Dread throughout his entire lifetime. But her son Daemon would heed the Dragon Keeper's advice and go for the younger, more ferocious Caraxes when the Bloodworm lost his rider to a Myrish crossbow bolt. As for Alyssa herself, she was looking strong following Daemon's birth in 81 AC, and even got pregnant once again in 83 AC, but her third pregnancy was not like the last two, and she would never get to ride her beloved Red Queen the way she once had ever again. Due to complications during her labor and childbirth, Alyssa died in 84 AC, never quite recovering from the effects of birthing her third son, Aegon, who followed his mother to an early grave just 6 months after his own birth. Had Alyssa survived this childbirth and her elder brother Aemon still died during the Myrish bloodbath's fallout, she would have been the Queen of Westeros, or at least been a major political player, given the fact that Jaehaerys appointed Baelon his heir after Aemon's death. The Red Queen could have had a Red Queen on her back once Baelon ascended his father's throne, but alas, as we know now, that was not to be. During this time, Meleys became riderless, and we can assume that she made her lair in the Dragon Pit instead of Dragonstone, because that was where she was born. She would spend 3 years in that state before being claimed by another Targaryen princess, who could potentially become queen one day. The Red Queen's second and final rider, Princess Rhaenys Targaryen, claims Meleys. After spending 3 riderless years in the Dragon Pit of King's Landing, the Red Queen is claimed by a woman who has had a great chance of becoming the actual first queen of all Westeros. In the same year that Prince Aemon Targaryen bonded with Caraxes, he also welcomed his first daughter and only child into the world. Princess Rhaenys Targaryen was born with the thick black hair of her mother Jocelyn Baratheon and the lilac eyes of her father Aemon. She was named after King Aegon Targaryen's favorite sister wife, an indication of her standing in the realm. As the firstborn child of the heir to the Iron Throne, Rhaenys was expected to be named heir after him. Upon her birth, good Queen Alysanne declared her our queen-to-be, but King Jaehaerys was notably silent on the matter, though it wasn't as if he was not fond of his granddaughter. Rhaenys grew up to become just as fiery and lovely as her namesake, and by the time she was 13 years of age, she became a dragon rider, claiming for herself the Red Queen as her mount, with Meleys' nickname serving as the double reminder of Rhaenys' own presumed position. Rider and dragon quickly bonded with each other, given Rhaenys' similarity to Meleys' previous rider, Alyssa. The crown princess was exceedingly clever and capable as a politician, and fierce in the face of adversity. She owned a suit of armor made out of steel and copper, which shone in the sun, indicating that Princess Rhaenys was also trained in arms, like Alyssa before her. The fact that she went for this armor also indicates that she probably had her dragon in mind when getting it made, because Meleys' markings and Rhaenys' armor would meld into one another when the princess rode atop her steed clad in military garb, and the glimmer from her armor made it harder to pinpoint her exact location, keeping her safer than most from projectile weapons. 2 years after claiming Meleys, Rhaenys was invited to be a part of one of her grandfather's many royal progresses, with this one heading for the Reach. She flew her Red Queen to Highgarden first, where she joined up with King Jaehaerys and continued on with him to all 4 of the Shield Islands, becoming a part of the progress herself. This could be seen as a sign that Rhaenys was considered to be the official heir at this point, because only Jaehaerys' appointed heirs were known to have accompanied him on his progresses, besides his good queen. Prince Aemon did it in his lifetime, and Prince Baelon would do it after his brother's passing. Thus, Meleys became the third dragon that wasn't Silverwing to accompany Vermithor on a tour of the realms that their riders governed. At the island of Greenshield, Rhaenys announced her intention to marry Lord Corlys Velaryon, master of ships and richest man in all the 7 kingdoms, and King Jaehaerys greatly approved of her choice for a match. It is said that when Lord Corlys wedded his dragon princess, he also wedded her dragon, for Rhaenys was insistent upon arriving to her wedding ceremony on Meleys' back, and was known to have told her husband that they could travel the ends of the world together, but she would get there faster as she would be flying. And so, after pulling the biggest flex one could possibly pull on their her uber-rich and self-made husband-to-be, Rhaenys and Meleys became the Ladies of Driftmark and also the royal court, though they would relinquish that latter honor in 92 AC, when Jaehaerys passed over Rhaenys in favor of Baelon, and the queen who never was left for her husband's seat alongside her dragon. Though many Targaryen dragons had been often seen hunting and roosting on Driftmark, Meleys became the first to call the island home. It's possible that during her residency on the ancient seat of the Valerians, she laid a clutch of eggs from which sea smoke was born, though this is not known. By the time the Dance of the Dragons came about, Meleys was not as swift as she was in her youth, but she was still capable of outpacing Caraxes and the rest of the dragons owned by the Greens, if she were roused enough. The Red Queen's role in the Dance of Dragons. Though we do not have an official estimation of her exact size during the conflict, we can assume that she was at least as big as, if not bigger than, Sea Smoke, though that can be disputed given the fact that the dragons born in the Dragon Pit were known to be much smaller than their older counterparts, and Meleys herself had not exactly seen the kind of action that would make a Targaryen dragon grow big and strong, but she still had speed and maneuverability on her side, and when going up against inexperienced warriors like her nephew Aegon II, and implacably martial commanders like Criston Cole, it was her nimbleness and the fact that she was being ridden by one of the greatest minds in Westeros that made Meleys such a threat to the Greens, despite them possessing far more full-sized dragons who were more suited to battle than, say, Prince Jaehaerys' Vermax. Oh, and they also had Vhagar. Perhaps that is why she was targeted as the first dragon they needed to take out for the Blacks to falter on their path to victory. Criston Cole advised his king to use force, not diplomacy, to unite the Seven Kingdoms under his rule, and started a bloody campaign against the Black Lords, whose lands were closer to the capital and on the mainland of Westeros. Making their way north from King's Landing, they secured the submission of 3 Black Lords and their castles, adding their strengths to Aegon's host, and then sacked the port of Duskendale. Though Caraxes had already ensured the submission of Green River Lords by landing atop the Kingspire Tower at the start of the dance, Aegon's retaliation had been fierce and intimidating. An equal response was warranted, and Queen Rhaenyra Targaryen was not in the state to make any rational decisions given her recent losses. When Lord Staunton sent her a message beseeching her for help, she dispatched the only woman who truly knew her own plight at her Black Council, her aunt Rhaenys. Clad in her warrior's armor and mounted atop Meleys, the Queen Who Never Was and the Red Queen would arrive to assist Rhaenyra's supporters, but would end up laying down their lives in what would become the first official dance between dragons since Maegor the Cruel descended upon his nephew Aegon and his dragon Quicksilver in the battle beneath the God's Eye nearly a century ago. Despite being outnumbered on the ground and in the air, Meleys managed to avoid taking any injuries from Criston's army and artillery, using her swiftness to dodge everything thrown at her, but fighting 2 massive dragons meant you had to rely on more than your speed to ensure a sure-shot victory. Archmaester Gildane believed that if Meleys had to take on a single dragon in a fight, she would have stood a chance to defeat even the mighty Vhagar, who had matched Balerion in size by the time the dance occurred. Though she would eventually fall, the Red Queen would not go down without a fight, managing to severely injure one of the Greens' most important dragons and leaving it incapable of ever fighting at the same level again. And considering the fact that it was the Pretender King's own golden steed, you can imagine the symbolic and literal pressure it put on the Greens.
Men would sooner put the realm to the torch than see a woman ascend the Iron Throne.
Meleys in House of the Dragon. Though Meleys has only been shown once so far in House of the Dragon, when Rhaenys and Laenor arrive at King's Landing for the royal wedding, you can already see that she is just a little bit faster than Sea Smoke, a little more graceful. In the interviews that Rhaenys actress Eve Best has given to media outlets since promotion for House of the Dragon began, the description of the relationship between her and Meleys has always been far more personal than any other dragons, with Eve even saying that Meleys was a part of Rhaenys and vice versa. If we are to go along with 3 types of dragons that showrunners Ryan Condal and Miguel Sapochnik outlined for us, then Meleys is a dinosaur-type breed of dragon, because she shares most of her physical features with Dany's dragons, who have been classified as falling under this category. This makes her the perfect dragon to ride into a battle, and given the fact that she seems to retain her speed and grace from her younger years, she is a prime candidate to become a part of Rhaenyra's vanguard. Though we have already told you what Meleys' fate is is going to look like, it will be astonishing nonetheless to witness it occur on screen, as the Battle of Rook's Rest is one of the bloodiest events of the exceptionally violent Dance of the Dragons as it is. We can't wait to see Eve Best bust out her sass while squaring up to Aegon and Kristen, and then shutting their mouths up with her ingenuity, even though it would be the last thing she would ever do.
Obeisance to her.
That was before there was a true-born prince named Aegon Targaryen. Rhaenyra's succession will be challenged.
The legacy of Meleys the Red Queen. It is said that after the death of the last dragon, the Targaryen kings of the latter half of their dynasty displayed the skulls of all their fallen beasts of war in the throne room for the Red Keep. 19 dragon skulls adorned the walls and peered towards the courtiers gathered near the Iron Throne, from Balerion's massive monstrosity to the last dragon's shriveled skull that was no bigger than a mastiff's skull. Meleys' cranial remains were a part of his macabre interior decor, because they were carried back to King's Landing after Rhaenys fell. The Red Queen led a singular existence, being blessed with speed and swiftness, unlike any Targaryen dragon before or since, and was the mount of 2 women who by rights should have also been queen of all of Westeros. Meleys' temperament was a perfect match for the fiery and fierce natures of both Alyssa and Rhaenys, and she proved her worth as a royal Targaryen dragon both in times of peace and times of war. At a time when men were fighting over the succession to the Iron Throne, the Red Queen took to the skies when the realm needed her most, and her like was never seen again. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone.